Welcome to the Pickle Barrel Fantasy Football Podcast, July 12th, 2016, Season 2, Episode 4. I'm Andy.
And I'm Frank.
Bernie Sanders has officially endorsed Hillary Clinton for president. Taylor Swift is the highest-grossing celebrity this year with $170 million in annual earnings. That's more than Floyd Mayweather Money Jr. made in one fight. And Tim Duncan has retired, and no one seems to give a shit about it. Well. How you feeling, Frank?
Pretty good. Ready to get into this next division we got here.
Yeah, I am too. So we're doing the AFC East. Made a mistake at the end of the last episode, said it was the AFC North. It is the East. So today we're going to break down the Dolphins, the Bills, the Jets, and the Pats. So I'm pretty excited about this one.
Indeed.
Had some positive feedback from the last one, that we had a nice analytical podcast. Not the most popular thing we've ever done, but certainly for you guys that are more into fantasy football at this point, give you a more in-depth view. Again, if you're not sure what we're doing here, what we're doing is pretty much team analytics.
Yeah.
Looking at every individual fantasy impact player from the perspective of, like, basically how their team impacts their performance.
Yeah.
A little different kind of perspective. You don't see this very often in fantasy football podcasts.
But also in addressing any sort of changes you might see in terms of the team, whether on offense or defense, any coaching changes, any sort of guys who got dropped or added, draft, whatnot. But yeah, just going through the whole thing, but definitely focusing on the fantasy players.
Exactly, yeah. So we're not going to get too into anything like, what are their chances to make the Super Bowl, playoffs like that. Really focusing on how does their offseason acquisitions, how does their things that are normally not considered so much like coaching and offensive line affect fantasy value. So we're going to start with the Dolphins, and that's going to be mine. So basically, rolling right into it, the Dolphins' bye week is 8, and they apparently have the 11th hardest schedule in the NFL. So just to go through it real quick, they open up with Seattle, then New England, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, the Jets, San Diego, the Rams, San Francisco, Dallas, and then for your fantasy football playoffs, Arizona, the Jets again, and Buffalo for your fantasy football Super Bowl.
That's rough. Those last three.
Yeah, Arizona, New York, and Buffalo.
Tough defenses.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something to certainly consider, especially with a team like the Dolphins. But so the draft, I think a lot of people know the big news is that they were able to steal Laramie Tunsil, the pot-smoking, got caught on video, blackmailed, whole thing to that story.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think it ended up working out great for them.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Without a, they got him 13th, is that right?
Yeah, 13th overall
13th
pick.
overall, fuck yeah. No, they got a steal. I heard that he's having a little bit of trouble adjusting because they want him to play, I think, a different position on the offensive line. But
yeah, he was drafted as an offensive tackle.
He's a beast.
I mean, yeah, he's going to be just fine, whatever they do with him. Definitely going to be an immediate starter.
Oh, yeah.
I just think the whole situation with that is hilarious. I mean, basically, somebody took but if you're not familiar with what happened, somebody took a film of him smoking pot and basically blackmailed him with it, and it cost him, I don't know, about $5 million in his rookie contract.
12 draft spots.
Yeah, exactly, which is huge. And I think that's the reason you saw some of the quarterbacks go so high as they will, because as far as I was tracking leading up to the draft, he was the highest-rated player.
He was.
A steal for them there, an A+. I mean, good on them for taking the risk. For the rest of their draft picks, number 2 in the second round, they drafted a cornerback. Then they got a running back in the third, Kenyon Drake from Alabama. So this is a guy most likely he's going to immediately take over the number 2 position for Jay Ajayi. He's a catch-passing back.
Isn't he returning some balls
He will
too?
be, yeah, and he's going to be like the main returner for punt or for kick returns.
For kickoff.
Jarvis Landry still holds punt returns. But yeah, I mean, I think for him, he's a guy to just watch just in general in his career. He has some potential, and I don't think he'll necessarily take over the top spot from Jay Ajayi, but certainly something to keep an eye on, especially if they decide under this new coaching regime to use more pass catching back type situations.
Yeah.
Number 4, they got a wide receiver, Leonato LaRue from Rutgers. He only dropped 2 passes in college.
Wow.
Now that's pretty incredible, but just such a deep
Did he only play for a year?
No, he played for 2 years.
Okay.
Just such a deep wide receiver core there, though. I don't think you see him breaking through. Another wide receiver in the 5th round, Jakeem Grant, This guy's 5'6". Literally, I thought that was a typo, so I had to look it up from 2 different sources. But he has, it wasn't even 4.2 like I told you. It's 4.1 speed.
Wait, he's 5. Oh, okay.
He's 5'6".
I was thinking 6'5" for some reason.
He's a total of 66 inches. He's only 11 times taller than the average dick is long.
Was he at the combine? was he at the combine?
I guess that's where they got the numbers from.
Yeah.
4.1 speed, though, that's insane. So
that is.
Now, there is some history of guys that short doing well, namely Darren Sproles, who's 5'6" himself, but he's not a wide receiver. So, I don't know, it's just very strange.
That is strange.
He might be taking over some return duties as well, they say, just because he's so shifty.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, with their 6th pick, they got a safety. With the 7th, they picked up Brandon Daughtry, a quarterback from Western Kentucky. I guess a long shot quarterback, hoping that maybe they can develop him later. And number 8, they got in the 8th round, or with their 8th pick, it was in the 7th round, Thomas Duarte, a tight end from UCLA, but he probably won't even make the cut. So, I mean, you can see they kind of went more offensive-minded in their draft, which you kind of understand because Miami already has a decent defense. But, it's some interesting. I think the biggest one biggest impact on fantasy is actually Larry Tunsil, just because he makes the O-line that much better.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then, again, Kenyon Drake, to a degree, kind of has some impact in there as well.
We'll see. He could be something good in the years to come. It probably won't see much this year, I'd imagine, but might see some good stuff that could lead to something in a few years. So.
Yeah, exactly. As far as offseason moves, other than the draft, they really didn't have that much. They re-signed Jordan Cameron, except they made him take a pay cut because Jordan Cameron sucked last year.
He did. He was hurt a little bit, though, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, but it was just a disappointing year for him in general. You expected him. I think he played for the Browns the year before. Or did he play for the Bengals? One of the two.
Played for the Browns.
And it was pretty good. It was one of top 5, I think.
He had a weird freak year, kind of like Barnage did.
Yeah. That's the thing that worries me about some of those tight ends is sometimes they have these flash-in-the-pan years. Yeah. And I think that's what we saw with Jordan Cameron. He's not a guy that I really recommend drafting next year at all. I mean, if anything, wait and see how he does. And, pick him up on the waiver wire, make a bid for him, if he has a good string of games.
Yeah.
And again, they don't really have a lot of talent at the running back position. So Jay Ajayi appears to be the guy there now. So,
what do you think about that guy? I've heard he can't catch the ball well, but I mean, it sounds like he's going to be the lead back still.
Oh, he's going. I mean, that is what all the signs are pointing to in the offseason is that Jay Ajayi is going to be the number 1 back, but it's definitely going to be some sort of timeshare. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I think maybe Kenyon Drake is somewhat interesting, especially with Adam Gase. You remember he's the offensive coordinator originally from Chicago, or was from Chicago. The other
Forte.
Yeah. So and he wasn't quite what made Forte. It was the offensive coordinator before that I think really established Forte.
Trestman.
Yeah, as a pass catching back. But he did use him in that scenario. So just something to keep an eye on. Adam Gase. He's the guy that led Manning to his insane 2013 year.
That is true, yeah.
Yep, and he doesn't have the same talent at QB, though. So, but, obviously Peyton Manning in 2013 is very different from Ryan Tannehill in 2016. But it's just something, he's more of an offensive-minded guy in general.
Yeah.
And I just wonder with his history, like, what his plans are, because it's kind of difficult for me to ascertain from the research that I did if he's really more of a, if he really wants to utilize the run game more, which I'd assume so, just because they used it so little last year with Lamar Miller, who was such a talented back.
I know.
So I don't know. I can't really give you a good analysis on how Adam Gase is going to affect that offense. All I would assume is that he's going to try to up the tempo a little bit, get the ball moving, and I think we'll see more plays per game on the offensive side than we saw last year. Especially if he utilizes the run more. So, moving into their offensive line. So, Tannehill was either the second most sacked QB or the most sacked QB every year since 2012. So, that's something that's pretty concerning to me. But the offensive line, right now, it has 4 former first-round picks out of the 5 starters. The problem has been injuries in the past. So, they're a good unit, but, the big thing with them is that they added Jeremy Tunsil.
Yeah.
And so you assume that with now 4 out of 5 of their first starters being first-round picks, with a lot of those guys having developed a little bit, that they're going to be a good unit.
I think it should turn around. I mean, they still have Pouncey, I think, is one of them. I know they lost Incognito, but I think you're right. I think they I think it should definitely improve, but man, those are some fucking god awful stats. Fuck.
Yeah,
Getting
exactly.
sacked the most, but yeah,
I think the bottom
it can't
line
get any worse,
is
right?
is the potential's there, but they got to kind of prove it. We'll get a little bit into that, how it affects their fantasy value. So for their fantasy notables, I think the biggest name on there is Jarvis Landry.
Yeah.
Last year had 1157, 4 touchdowns, 113 rush yards with 1 rush TD, and added 1 return TD. And the big thing with PPR or half PPR, he had 110 receptions, which was, I think, the 3rd or 4th most in the entire league.
Wow.
So a utility guy that can do it all, and great chemistry with Tannehill. One of Tannehill's big hits on him is that he can't throw the deep ball.
Which is good for Jarvis. I mean,
Exactly.
Fuck.
Exactly. I project him to have an even better year with 120 receptions, 1,300 yards, 5 receiving TDs, adding 100 rush yards on the ground, and 1 rush TD.
I don't want to jump on anything too early, but you pointed this out, and that is that there's another wide receiver that a lot of people are talking about, this Devontae Parker kid, and I'm sure you'll get to him. But don't you think that limits Devontae Parker's? I mean, obviously Jarvis is the lead guy; he's the veteran there. But I mean, don't you think that even more so hinders him? The fact that Tannehill can't fucking throw the ball
that's
deep
my
at
main
all?
concern with Devontae Parker is not the guy's innate talent, but it's the weapons around him who make him, a little less desirable, and namely Tannehill, just because he's kind of like Alex Smith in that he can't really throw the deep ball that well. So Devontae Parker is kind of that natural deep threat. He had 494 yards last year, 3 touchdowns, really did well in the late games. So I'd assume that he's going to do much better, but I've still only got him projected for 800 yards and 5 TDs just because the deep pass has been a problem. So if you want to take a flyer on him in the late rounds, I'd say go for it. He might be the guy.
Yeah.
And the only other really wide receiver I'm going to mention is Kenny Stills. Kenny Stills is the number 3 guy right now, 3rd on the depth chart list. He kind of sucked last year, 440 for 3 touchdowns. I don't think he's the talent we once thought he was.
I think he's exclusively the deep ball. He just runs. He just outraces you.
Yeah,
and hopefully
exactly.
the ball gets to him.
Exactly. And he had similar numbers to Devontae Parker, but had done it steadily throughout the year instead of really picking up at the end of the year, which is why Devontae Parker's probably the better pick. Running backs, we got to talk about Jay Ajayi, young sophomore, 3.8 yards per carry last year, only 1 touchdown. He didn't get much work because Lamar Miller is just such a better back, or was at least last year. Kind of utilizes. The question is, will Gase utilize the run game more, and will that make Ajayi, a better player? There's still a lot of questions surrounding this guy.
I'd have to imagine he would. Gase has always struck me as having at least a decently strong running game. I mean, he had No Sean Marino that one year. He had Forte, though Forte is more of a passing back. But still, I mean, I think you're right. I think he's gonna force them to incorporate it, especially with fucking Tannehill getting sacked so much. It just makes sense.
I mean, you have to kind of have to consider him towards the 6th, 7th, 8th round just because he is a starter.
I think he's going to end up going 6, but I don't know. We'll see.
But I wouldn't feel comfortable taking him maybe until the 7th or 8th.
Same with me, just because he is such an unknown quantity, especially in an offense like that isn't very proven at that position.
Right. With offensive line questions and everything surrounding it. And then finally, we're going to round it out with the Dolphins with Ryan Tannehill. Last year, passed for 4,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, 141 rushing yards, but 12 interceptions, and he was sacked a shitload. My concern with him, it was just ridiculous. My concern with him is there's just so many other good QBs. He was in my top 10 going into last year, but I mean, maybe the O-line ends up being ridiculous with Larry Tunsil being added to that group and Pouncey and them coming on and stuff. But I would say maybe draft him towards the end of the entire draft as your backup, and maybe he ends up coming around. But I wouldn't take anything before round 12.
You use him solely on that bye week and just pray he's
right.
decent in between.
Exactly. My feeling is he's the type of guy that someone's going to draft him most likely, but he'll probably get dropped. And you just pick him up when the bye week comes.
He'll get passed around like a cheap stripper.
Yeah.
On the waiver wire.
So you get passed around like that Filipino stripper with the ugly teeth that nobody wants to give him a lap dance, but it's that's the only ones left. So.
I guess I'll take what I get.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what I got for the Dolphins. A big takeaway for the Dolphins is that there's not a whole lot of fantasy talent. There's some potential if the offensive line, I think, can really, and Adam Gase can get that whole squad into motion and really find the rhythm. But right now, I'd say Jarvis Landry in the 3rd, maybe 4th round if you're a standard league. Other than that, be very cautious. Proceed with caution with the Dolphins.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. All right, well, I'm going to get into the Buffalo Bills right now. Jump right into it. Their draft, they had a fucking great draft if you love defense. They got old Shaq Lawson out of Clemson, number 1. He was a guy that a lot of people liked early on. And then a guy that I always heard great things leading up to, leading up to the draft, linebacker Reggie Ragland out of Alabama. He dropped in the 2nd round. Then after that, they kept building on defense. They also took quarterback Cardell Jones. Interesting one, we'll see. They've got 3 black quarterbacks.
Interesting.
Rex Ryan is not a racist. You can never call him a racist.
Clearly not. Clearly not. It's just interesting that they would take a quarterback there when they've already got, Tyrod Taylor and the talent that they already have there. But
yeah, no, but I mean, Cardell Jones did have that one good year, played his ass off in that national championship and everything like that. So, I don't know. I mean, he's a big dude, can throw the fuck out of the ball. But, we'll see if he can put it all together. Maybe a few years in the NFL he can
yeah,
figure it out.
It seems like with a lot of these quarterback picks, because I've noticed that most teams end up taking a quarterback, or at least half of them end up taking a quarterback somewhere, just in the hopes that, this guy will turn into, Tom Brady.
Yeah, maybe he's a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
That only happens once every 10 years, unfortunately. But yeah, so they were pretty heavy. After that, they got a few other scrubs, some running backs and receivers and such. But they definitely built on defense again. And the Bills are known for their defense anyway, so that's great. They really improved on that in the true Rex Ryan fashion.
Going after them Flyers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But the first 2 picks, dude, I think Shaq Lawson is hurt, but he should come into the season at some point. But Reggie Ragland, I think both of them are fucking stellar. They're going to be great for him. So, off-season moves, notable ones, Ed Reed. Fucking former dominant-ass safety.
He's a name we haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, he's now the assistant defensive ends coach for them. So that's cool.
Okay.
So
that's why I was like, wait a second, he's playing?
No, he's getting into coaching. So, no, not playing anymore. Other than that, they extended Richie Incognito, good for the O-line.
Yeah.
Released Mario Williams. So that was a big name that left. Just hasn't been as productive in the last few years. So they let him go on defense, but obviously they made up for it in the draft. Also, they franchise tagged one of their offensive tackles, so I take that as a good sign. They've got at least part of a good offensive line.
It's like those guys on the offensive line that are tackles or guards or maybe they're in defense or cornerbacks. They're the ones that typically don't get upset about getting franchise tagged.
Oh, yeah. No, they're happy.
They're not the Jimmy Grahams or those Le'Veon Bells that are going to get super pissed off about getting franchise tagged.
Yeah.
They're pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You tell me I'm the best at my position?
One other notable thing, if you're interested, Leonard Hankerson, a name you might have heard over the last couple of years, he is now a Bill. We'll see if he does anything, but he's a Bill. And other than that, basically the team remained intact. Should be much of the same team we saw this last year, but hopefully improved just because they've got another year under their belt. So schedule, they've got a pretty fucking difficult schedule. The 10th most difficult, rated by CBS. Week 1 they play at Baltimore, then week 3 Arizona, week 4 they got to go to New England, and then week 8 they got to play them again at home. Then the next week they go to Seattle, then Cincy in week 11, Oakland, week 13, and then Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Miami are actually their playoff week. So
okay, well,
that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I kind of like it because Pittsburgh's going to run the score up, so you're going to have to score points. That helps you. And Cleveland blows, and Miami, you can always play with Miami.
So am I to assume right now, because every team we've covered this far is playing the Cardinals, how many fucking teams are playing the Cardinals?
I know. It does seem like we're going over them a lot.
I think it's just that the way that the NFL lines up their schedules. If you play, you usually play several teams in the same divisions.
Yeah.
Even if it's a cross-conference thing, they line up just so it makes the conference schedules more fair. Yeah. So that's at least what I read into, because I was like, that's weird, because I'm seeing the Seahawks and the Cardinals and the Broncos are like getting matched up with all these AFC East and NFC South teams. And I think that's the reason why is they do that. So, like, you can expect players from the same conference to face the same defenses over the course. So, which makes sense. It makes it a little bit more fair. But something to consider in your fantasy draft.
Absolutely. And like most of you probably know, 2015 was Rex Ryan's first season. So this is his second season as a head coach. He's a well-known head coach. Should be good. I think the team should just improve. Second year in his offense, the team hasn't changed a lot. They've basically held on to everything good and just slightly improved in some defensive positions. But their offense looks pretty good, so let's go right into it. First guy, I always start out with the quarterback, but 2015 we got Tyrod Taylor. He was a guy that some people did call out. Well, a lot of people said, like, this guy's going to do some shit in 2015, and he definitely was serviceable. Had 3,000 yards, 20 TDs, only 6 interceptions, and another almost 600 yards on the ground, plus 4 rushing TDs.
And that's what adds his value. That's what makes him valuable. Because if he was a 3,000-yard rookie passer with 20 touchdowns, we wouldn't be talking about him.
And that is with missing 2+ games.
Yeah.
One notable thing I will say, he did have 9 fumbles, which is a little bit high for
that's really high.
Yeah. So
in addition to the interceptions.
Yeah, but only 6 interceptions. I mean that's actually a relatively low number. So I mean Tom Brady I think only threw like 7 this last year. So granted he throws the ball a little bit more. But
yeah, exactly.
But Tyrod Taylor had a pretty serviceable year. If he can stay healthy, maybe Sammy Watkins steps up a little bit more. They start throwing the ball just a little bit more. For 2016, I'd like to say also he's 26. But in 2016, I think the guy's going to bump it up a little bit, stay a little bit more healthy, hopefully, run smarter. I think he does about 3,500 yards, 25 TDs. Interceptions stay about the same, and I think he's good for another 505 TDs on the ground, too. So
that makes him, I'd say that puts him right around the number 10 spot.
I can see that, yeah. Maybe. It depends. There's a lot of potential with the team, so, I mean, we'll have to obviously wait and see. But I think it's only good for him. First year he did that already, so I think it only gets better. He's still really young, and most of the guys around him are pretty young too. So, other than that, his ADP right now is 113. So you can get him for pretty fucking cheap. 15th overall quarterback. This is according to Fantasy Pros. So, that is what it is. You can get him very cheap. So. One of those guys, if you're picking dog shit at the end of your draft, you might as well fucking take a flyer on him. I mean, he's a quarterback. He might be, he might have a good week or two. Good matchups.
So, all right, what are your thoughts of, like, for people out there that, like, really want to take late quarterbacks? Is it just stupid at any point to take 3 quarterbacks really late? Or could that be a viable strategy?
I don't think it is if you don't draft any quarterbacks until like the 8th round.
Right, at least the 8th. I was thinking even more like you pick up like
later, you're right.
Matt Stafford, Tyrod Taylor, and Eli Manning.
Yeah.
And you just go with those 3, see how they're doing. I mean, I don't think that's a terrible idea just because of how just because of how dispendable, like we talked about before, late round guys are.
The end of your draft is always dog shit. I mean, it seems like it's me.
So maybe why not pick up guys that are on the fence of that top 10 quarterback?
No.
So something to consider. Anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely another strategy. A very, very good one. Well, maybe. I guess we don't know. But definitely something to think about. Probably the most fantasy relevant guy people are going to give a shit about, Sammy Watkins. Started to put it together last year. Had over 1,000 yards, 60 catches, 9 TDs. He did miss 3 games. He's only 23. I can't remember what he was drafted at. It was like 8 or 9 overall pick. I mean, he was a high draft pick. Great receiver. The only unfortunate thing is Tyrod Taylor doesn't quite pass as much as you'd hope. So hopefully that improves in the second year. But if Sammy stays healthy, I don't see why the guy gets 75 catches, probably about 1,300 yards, and probably 12 touchdowns. I mean, I think he enters the number 1 receiver game, and he's being drafted for that. There is the foot injury.
Yeah.
The knee injury. He had knee surgery in the off season, but he does say he'll be ready for week 1. So
yeah, I was not a believer in Sammy Watkins last year. I thought he was overvalued, but having watched the way that they use him and the way that they pretty much exclusively target him for any deep ball that they ever go
that's
for
sure.
Then it's just and he's so good at that deep game that I mean, that's why he has so few receptions and such outrageous numbers. It's because but you live and die by the long pass when you're Sammy Watkins.
He averaged almost 20 yards a catch last year.
It's insane. It's insane. I mean, but that's what you get when you got a guy like that. He's like basically the antithesis of a Jarvis Landry, where like he doesn't rely on the dump and dink passes and occasional like bursts out. No, he is the deep ball guy. He's not going to get 120 receptions ever in his entire career, but he will have big years, and he's going to have huge games and shitty games. But he's not going to give you the consistency across.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
He's going at it at an ADP of 34 overall. And he's the 17th receiver off the board. Like we've been saying too, the receivers are really deep this year.
So
I mean,
question
I
for
think that
you:
makes sense because the injury. But
in our half PPR slant, who do you take? Do you take Jarvis Landry or do you take Sammy Watkins?
I take Jarvis Landry because of the catch potential. I mean, I think the guy's going to catch quite a few more balls.
And then that probably switches with the standard league.
Probably, yeah. I mean, because I still think there's a good chance that Watkins because of the catches he gets. I mean, he's
they're big.
Yeah, he's going to get a lot of yardage as a result of it. So yeah, I'd say you're probably right, and maybe even more TDs this year. So that there's also that to factor in. But PPR, I still like Landry quite a bit. So I mean, he just gets fucking peppered. But all right, let's go into the last two guys that I really got that are relevant. Oh, Shady McCoy.
Oh, LaShawn.
Freshly, doesn't have to worry about those charges for fighting people in the nightclub. Fighting the cops in the nightclub. Yeah, breaking champagne
bottles. Don't ever tell me a black
bottles.
man can't get away with fighting the cops.
I think it was last week, the fucking lawyer in Philly.
The district attorney.
Whoever the fucker is. Yeah, said he's clear. We're not going to charge him a shit. So that's good because it didn't look good immediately.
Not immediately. No. Whenever you hear like assaulted the police, you're like, oh.
Exactly. McCoy was pretty good in 2015 with the exception of some injuries, but had over 200 carries, averaged like 4.5 yards per carry. He had 900 rushing yards, only 3 TDs, slightly disappointing.
It was. I had him last year, but he was injured for a good bit of the year.
He was, but he did also catch 32 balls for 300 yards and caught another 2 TDs. So he's always had that. That's been a great thing about McCoy. He's always been a great receiving back. 2016, assuming he can stay healthy, which I think he can because last year was actually his worst year in terms of health. Every other year he's been healthy.
Been pretty good, yeah.
So he's a pretty tough guy. I think he's probably good for about 250 attempts. I think he can break about 11 to 1,200 yards. But I still think he's going to be limited in TDs because of the next guy I'm going to talk about. Probably only get about 6 or 7 touchdowns. But hopefully the passing game is where he flourishes.
Carlos, the Buffalo Bill buttfucker.
Yeah, Carlos Williams. He's just too big of a back, and he's just a great goal line back. And he fucking averaged 5.7 yards per carry last year.
Yeah. So I guess with Shady, you're really more relying on the long breakout touchdowns or the pass catching touchdowns.
Yeah, he's more of a PPR value, I would say.
I'd say so too.
His actual rushing attempts are going to get limited by Carlos Williams, but in the passing game, I think he's probably good for about 40 to 50 catches and a few touchdowns. So.
Do you still think they use Shady McCoy in first down situations? Or
yes.
Do you think? Yeah. Okay. And I mean, certainly in third down, unless it's third and short.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that. I mean, like he's still going to be. He's not quite a true. I don't think at this point you can call him a true every down back. And like you said, the goal line poaching.
He was before.
The goal line poaching is upsetting, but it is what it is. You have to deal with that.
Yeah, there's the goal line poaching, and then just Carlos Williams is a good back, so he's going to get to play. But LaShawn McCoy is more of that passing back. He spreads out the offense and allows for Tyrod Taylor to do his thing a little bit more. But yeah, Carlos Williams last year was fucking great, mainly because he had 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. He also caught 2 touchdowns, which is strange, but I think that's more to do with Tyrod Taylor and the way he plays. 2016, I think he improves a little bit, probably gets closer to 100, a little over 100 attempts. I think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns next year. I think he's going to be a guy, definitely if LaShawn McCoy goes down, you want, because they trust him.
Absolutely. One of those guys that I support handcuffing.
Absolutely.
Get LaShawn McCoy, then pick up Carlos Williams because you can get him as late as you fucking want.
I will say there is one caveat with him. He did put on a bunch of fucking weight in the offseason. Apparently he was 25 pounds overweight when he came in OTAs, and he attributed that to putting on weight because his wife is pregnant.
So, he had to eat with her.
Yeah. So, yeah. Got a little fat in the offseason, but hopefully he was reprimanded quite well, and it will fucking unfuck
Yeah,
that.
they probably, like they do, they probably put a special nutritionist just for him to follow him around.
Yeah, definitely. But that's all I got on the Bills, so, yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, moving to the always entertaining New York Jets, the home of Butt Fumble, the home of old Rex Ryan. Fun times with them. Schedule, moving in straight into it. Seventh toughest schedule, according to NFL.com, and a Week 11 bye. So they, again, same type thing. Yeah, I'll take one. With the Cardinals, the Seahawks, they're facing all those West Coast teams that you hate to hear. Really tough schedule all around. In the fantasy football playoffs, they get a little bit of a reprieve with the 49ers, and then straight up into the Dolphins and the Pats for their fantasy football Super Bowl. The Pats haven't been quite the defense they were in years past, but still pretty formidable. So it gives you a little bit of concern with their fantasy football players, but not terrible. And then, moving into their draft, they really stuck mostly to the defensive side of the ball. A few notables, they got a quarterback in the second round, Christian Hattenberg from Penn State. He's definitely a quarterback project. Will ride the bench this year pretty much regardless. Brandon Shell on offensive tackle to shore up their offensive line, which I'll get more into, which they certainly need at this point. Sharon Parker from Clemson. He's kind of a steal in the seventh. 6'1", 209, played behind Sammy Watkins and DeAndre Hopkins at Clemson.
Really?
Runs a 4.2. Yeah. So that's an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Everybody said that was one of the best picks of the entire draft. They weren't sure how he actually slipped that far. I don't think he'll break into the lineup this year, but something to keep an eye on for later years. Pickups. The big pickups when we talk about the Jets is obviously Matt Forte. $4 million contract for 1 year. They also re-signed Bilal Power to back him up, and then Kerry Robinson from the Saints. So kind of short up their running back core after they lost Chris Ivory. Ivory, no longer the guy. He's down there in Jacksonville to try to fix their shit show of a running back core. But Matt Forte is a guy that I really like. I mean, I have really liked for a long time. Though, unfortunately, because of the woes that the Jets are having, which I'm about to get into, I'm not as high as I was. Like, I was almost... For sure, I was going to draft him in the fourth round. Couldn't quite understand why he was going even that late, but now I totally understand.
It's not going to be really fun if he has Geno Smith passing to him.
That's for sure.
And a shitty O-line blocking.
And that's the problem, is that Fitzmagic, the bearded wonder, still without a contract in New Jersey.
I think you might as well just write that one off. I don't see him coming back.
It's tough at this point. Like, I mean, apparently there's animosity, there's bad blood at this point, which is he feels he's been completely undervalued by that organization. The organization has felt slighted by him, basically saying that he was for sure going to come back, but then wanted too much money. It's a mess, and that will have a huge impact if on Forte and Brandon Marshall, if old Geno Smith
and Decker.
Yeah, and Decker too. I mean, that probably even more so.
Decker becomes trash, in my opinion.
I agree with you. So that is something that you have to It made my projections for this team pretty much worthless. So I'll go into a few of them, but they're pretty much based off of Fitzmagic's being there, and I don't know that he will be. And then the second problem, in addition to the whole Fitzmagic controversy, is the O-line is falling apart.
Yeah.
There's this one line that said, the once glorious New York Jets O-line falling apart brick by brick. And that was for reference to DeBrickashaw Ferguson, the once 6-time Pro Bowler who decided to retire. Him and Nick Mangold, who is old as shit now as well, used to make the Nick and the Brick and have 9 Pro Bowls combined between them. And they never got hurt, but unfortunately Nick Mangold or DeBrickashaw Ferguson were solid for that team for years and years, but now that DeBrickashaw Ferguson's gone and Nick Mangold's so fucking old, I'm very concerned about this O-line.
Yeah. It's going to be a rough year. From what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to come out of New York this year.
Okay, let's talk about the good thing from the the O line last year was that they were in the number 3 rushing unit. They were really good and that's why Chris Suckadick Ivory was so good with them. The bad thing was they allowed 47 sacks for Fitzmagic,
Jesus,
which was one of the worst. Right now, they're rated already the 25th worst off O line. Only significant addition was Brandon Shell, but they have not really addressed the pass rush defense. So I'm really worried about them. That makes me very concerned for Matt Forte. I'm thinking now I really can't take him until a round later, until the 5th.
I think Forte is more of a 5th-round guy. I mean, I wouldn't expect to see a lot out of him. He's been a great running back for fantasy football, but I just don't see it anymore.
The last podcast, we brought up the point that there are really 2 backbones to an offense, and that's the quarterback and the O-line. And there are huge questions right now on both of those. So we're going to go over the impact players with a bit of morbidity to this. Fitzmagic last year was a decent backup, 14th overall QB as far as total fantasy points with 3,900 yards, 31 touchdowns, added 270 on the ground for 2 rushing TDs. 15 picks, not great, but I mean, compared to 31, that's pretty decent. Mm-hmm. The thing is, will he even play? And the O-line worries already. I've got him projected less. I've got him, even if he plays for the Jets with that O-line, I've only got him projected 3,700 yards with 28 TDs, with 200 yards on the ground and 1 rushing TD. If Geno Smith, if now when he was the starter for them in 2014 before he lost the job to Fitzmagic, out of only about he had a decent stat line for the games that he played, but he got beat out by Fitzmagic because he was fumbling the ball too much. He was got too many interceptions.
He also got punched in the fucking jaw in preseason. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
He broke his jaw.
Yes, I do. And but basically, his number of touchdowns equaled his number of picks. Very concerning if he's the guy. So again, these projections.
I think he fucking blows. Yeah. But I mean,
if I were the Jets, I would pay Fitzmagic whatever I needed to pay him at this point.
I think they're pretty tight in terms of their salary cap because they have a really good defense, which is the sad thing. I mean, and they've had to pay that. So
and that's one of the things that I was surprised when I was looking at their draft picks. They really addressed their defense still, which if you're a team that's already got a stout offense like the Panthers, that's fine. But Anyway, going into Matt Forte, in 13 games last year, he had 848 rushing yards for 4 rushing touchdowns, added 44 receptions in the air with 389 total yards and 3 touchdowns. The O-line run blocking will probably go from great to average, so you worry about that a little bit. So what you hope is that maybe he's just the outlet for a shitty O-line and that either Fitzmagic or Geno has to dump it off to him, and that gives his reception yards a little bit of a boost. But my projection for him is 1,000 yards with 5 touchdowns, adding 35 receptions on the ground with 300 receiving yards and 2 receiving TDs.
Okay. I think it's a little high, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, that's assuming he stays healthy, which is a big assumption.
There's just a lot of other backs there, too. A lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, Bilal Powell and Kerry Robinson, I really still think, even though Forte's 31 years old, I think he's still the premier back. He's still the premier talent.
I think he should definitely be number 1.
Yeah. Okay, then going into Brandon Marshall, last year had an insane year, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, number 3 overall wide receiver. But here's the problem: he's 32. Will Fitzmagic even play? With the O-line's concerns, I'm gonna have to downgrade him to a mid-grade wide receiver 2 this year.
He's starting to look like Larry Fitzgerald to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
I've got a massive downgrade in his projections to 1,150 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, which may even be a little bit generous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Geno can do that, but we'll see. I mean, I'm just assuming now that Geno is going to start.
Before this research, it was a coin flip for me between Brandon Marshall and Amari Cooper. Now, as AJ said, that coin has landed on tails. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going with Amari Cooper all the way. And then, again, Eric Decker, last fantasy-relevant player here. The O-line and the quarterback are even more of a concern for him. So I've got him as projected 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, a flex play. basically, or wide receiver.
But he is absolutely Fitzmagic dependent, right?
If
Fitzmagic doesn't play, he probably gets
Geno's
4
the guy,
or 5.
if Geno's the guy, then
TDs.
you might be looking at 700 yards and 6 TDs.
Yeah.
Like, it could be that bad.
Yeah.
But that's, bottom line is there's too many questions on the O-line and the QB, and if those questions don't get resolved, then you're looking at all these guys taking fantasy value hit.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Patriots.
Moving on to the Pats. So you want to start it off with their schedule?
Well, you're doing the defense and everything, right?
Yeah, I've got the draft and the O-line.
Okay. Yeah. Well, why don't you do that? Well,
all right. Yeah, we'll start with the draft. Interestingly enough, with the draft, they actually had a lot of picks, and so you can see with the mad scientist Bill Belichick is kind of like having the gears churning in his brain. So they actually made a lot of trades and had 3 picks in the 3rd round and 3 picks in the 6th round. Gave up the number 1 pick. But they got a cornerback in the 2nd round. Joe Thanney, he's a guard out of NC State, should shore up their offensive line. And then a 3rd backup quarterback for post-Brady planning. He's Joe Brissett from North Carolina State. And really the last big name for them as far as fantasy value is Malcolm Mitchell, wide receiver from UGA, in a book club with Reese Witherspoon, apparently.
I remember that name.
Yeah.
It's fast.
He was supposed to be. He's supposedly, the early word is he's like going to be the number 3 wide receiver. So something to keep an eye on. He's a real fast dude, kind of an undersized wide receiver, like they love to draft. And I'd be interested to see how they use him. Not draftable this year, but keep an eye on him. Yeah. And so that pretty much breaks down their draft. Going to the O-line, number 18 ranked by Pro Fantasy Football Focus. Thing about their offensive line is they made some moves in years past, so they're still a young group that's starting to progress. That really wasn't all that healthy last year and was much maligned, especially after the AFC conference game where Brady got the shit kicked out of him. But I wouldn't expect that to continue the same way. I'm somewhat higher on them this year. Nate Solder, who was pretty much the backbone of that offensive line, is returning.
I was going to say, they had a lot of injuries last year on the O-line, so
exactly.
We'll see that improve.
And what that does is basically because Solder got hurt, they had to move guys around that weren't in their suitable roles. With him returning, basically, I think that shortens them. I think that makes them the potential to be a top 10 offensive line.
It's always good.
Yep.
You want me to go ahead and get in the off season?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
The acquisitions.
The acquisitions, not a whole lot, but I'll just get into the fantasy relevant stuff. 2 maybe significant things. They signed Chris Hogan. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was a Bills wide receiver last year. Had a couple serviceable games, but nothing more than like a 15-point guy, high side. So, I don't know, but he fits the Edelman stereotype, white guy. Short, fast, quick, agile. I
don't know what it is about them Patriots, but like,
they love that receiver.
Is Bill Belichick a racist? Does he just not like black wide receivers?
I don't know. Well, he drafted Malcolm Mitchell.
And, Wes Welker, Damian Amendola, Julian Edelman, Gronk. I mean,
it's funny. It's very interesting. But yeah, no. Chris Hogan. So we'll see how that goes. But just keep that in the back of your head. Other than that, they did re-sign LeGarrette Blount, so he's going to be back. And they signed Martellus Bennett. They released Scott Chandler, in case you're wondering as well. So Martellus Bennett and Gronk are going to be the 2.
That's an interesting move to me because I think if it does anything, it just makes Gronk even more valuable. I don't really think that it necessarily...
Most definitely.
Because, they're going to be like, oh, shit, we have to cover the unicorn, Martellus Bennett, as well. And then Gronk's like, only 2 men for me to eat alive?
No, I definitely think it's going to be fucking great for Gronk. I mean, when Aaron Hernandez was there, Gronk saw great stat lines as well. Yeah. So, Martellus Bennett, another great tight end, very proven. I think it's going to be really fucking cool to see what those 2 can do together. So that's about it. Go straight into the fantasy players.
Yeah, let's do it.
This thing over with. We got the main guy, just because he deserves the respect, old Tom Brady. Last year, he came out with a hard dick and fucked everybody over because he was so pissed at fucking...
he looked at Roger Goodell in the eye. He said, fuck your suspension. I'm too rich. My wife is too hot, and I'm going to fucking play anyway. But it came back around this year.
It did, and he's got a 4-game suspension that he should have had last year. But There's still some court proceedings going on, but if I had to guess, I think Brady's going to have to do this time.
It sounds like it. It sounds like last year that there was some hope swirling around, and that hope turned into reality. But I don't think this year it's going to happen.
I think his appeals are up. But look for Brady to do good again. He's 38, so he doesn't have too many years left in the tank. But I think even though he's going to miss those. Missed that. I think he's still good for roughly 4,000 yards, maybe close to 30 TDs, and he always keeps his interceptions low. The great thing about Brady, and you've mentioned this before, I believe, is that when you draft him, you have him for the fucking playoffs. You're only missing these first 4 games.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, yeah, and like we've talked about, like there's so much late round quarterback talent that I think that you get him at a value. Like you really do. Like you can plug and play. Any of these Jameis Winston types, Eli Manning types, and be just fine.
Absolutely. He's going 75th as far as ADP, 8th overall quarterback. I think he's great. Once again, he becomes a steal. So,
question is his age. Like, when does Father Time catch up with Tom Brady?
I think he still is this year. I think for whatever reason he wants 5 Super Bowls, and then he retires. So I think this might be this year.
And plus,
Patriots are always in the game.
And if you draft him in the 8th round. All right, you lost your 8th round pick, but how often do you lose that 8th round pick?
Yeah, exactly. So. And it's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
If he's there in the 8th, I definitely think you get him. I think we might see him increase just a little bit because he is Tom Brady.
Yeah, I think we will too. I think he ends up going late 6th, early 7th.
Yeah. But now on to the most relevant fantasy player, and that is who we all know and love, the Gronk.
Gronk!
27-year-old Gronk, 5th year in the league. Actually, no, 6th year in the league. This is a badass dude. Had a great year last year. 1,200 yards, 75 catches, 11 TDs. Typical Gronk year. Just killing it.
Trugging along, like high-end wide receiver 2 numbers.
Yeah.
Thing.
I mean, I don't think there's anything anybody doesn't know who isn't doing mock drafts. He's going to go at the back end of the first round. He's going to be great. He's going to give you 1,300 yards. 12 to 15 touchdowns, bunch of catches.
And then there's also, there's the possibility, too, with Gronk that he has his career best year with, 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns.
Yeah, and being 27, I'd say he's in his prime.
Where do you, Frank Cochran, take him? Like, you're thinking A.J. Green or Des Bryant over him, but, is he even a thought in your mind, or would you say no? What if he's around with your 12th pick?
The problem is he's a tight end, and it's a position that he's going to sit there in the tight end position the entire year. I just like the receiver position more because it's more versatile. But, I think it's perfect for him. Any time after probably the 6th or 7th pick, I'd say it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I think for me, where I am, I can't really justify taking him with the 5th overall pick, but goddamn, if he actually slipped to me in the 2nd round like he did last year, I am snatching him up immediately. But I think he's going to go. I think people recognize his value at this point. He's going to go before the 13th.
He's too consistent. He's done it for too many years at this point, so he fucking deserves it. But Gronk, so no more needs to be said. The next best guy, we got old Julian Edelman.
Yes, the Jew-ish.
Yes.
Guy.
Did you know he was named by the American National Historic Jewish Society the 4th best Jewish football player ever in January?
Really?
Yes.
That only surprised me for one reason. Who's better?
Yeah. Can you name another Jew?
Who's played in the NFL? I'm kind of have drawn a blank there.
I can't think of one. Probably an O-lineman or some shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Some white position. But anyway, so Edelman was fucking great last year when he was playing. Unfortunately, he missed 7 games. So he only had about 60 catches, 700 yards, and 7 TDs.
I love Edelman from a PPR standpoint, but his injuries are the concern for me.
He's actually only played 1 full season.
Yeah, exactly. And, the thing with him is, he'll get these minor injuries. But the problem is, though, he runs full speed through the slot, does not worry about anything around him, catches the ball, and you're like, yeah, Julian, and then breaks his leg, but he holds on to the ball.
Yeah.
And he's like, I caught it, Tom! I caught the ball! And Tom's like, good job, son. And Bill Belichick's like, get in the fucking locker room!
There was a hilarious fucking tangent. Something I saw, apparently fucking Tom Brady went to UFC 200 with Justin Timberlake, and they were both wearing those fucking retarded old golfer hats. There was like a Instagram picture of them, and then Julian Edelman copied the picture, photoshopped his face in, and put one of those hats on his head, and said, "Thanks for the invite, guys." I thought that was kind of clever.
Apparently, if you weren't tracking, like, Julian Edelman is, like, super hard for fucking Tom Brady.
Oh, yeah. He loves to ride Tom Brady's coattails. For good reason. I mean, fuck, he only has so much time in the sun. I can't blame him. But
hey, good for him. Good on the short white guy for being one of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
In 5 years, we'll never speak your name again.
That's right.
But yeah, so Edelman, I mean, it comes down to injury. The guy's a fucking beast. He's a monster football player who just fights, but he's small and he gets broken.
Yeah,
so
that's the biggest concern. I mean, like, I love him. I love the guy as far as just the way he plays the game. But yeah, that's a concern.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, that's where I'm at with Edelman. Honestly, for me, I'm not really targeting him just because of the injuries. I just don't even want to fuck with him. But I mean, he's a great player, and when he does well, he does really well. So a lot of catches. He's kind of like a Jarvis. Like 2 years ago, he had like 109 catches one season. I mean,
exactly.
That's
he's a PPR
awesome.
monster.
Yeah.
I mean,
so definitely PPR leagues. He's bumped up a little bit, but you know, take it with caution. The next guy. It's pretty important in my opinion. Oh, one other thing with Edelman, he's 30, just in case you didn't know.
Wow.
So he's getting up there too.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
At least he was a quarterback in college.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. But the next guy, 25-year-old Dion Lewis, who is also an injury-prone guy. He's missed an entire season and played half. He's never actually started a full season. He's been there, but wasn't starting. But got hurt last year, has made a full recovery, and is going to be great again this year. Great thing about him, and a lot of people have pointed this out, is Tom Brady loved dumping the ball off, especially in his old age.
He does.
And it worked out great for Dion.
So there's a question, is like there was this entire stigma for, I think, 5 years, basically, of you do not play the New England running back. And then Dion Lewis comes around last year, shatters that stigma. Does he shatter it again this year, or do you think that the Bill butt-fucking Belichick carousel running back?
You know, it's funny because I had completely forgot about that until you just said it. So, yeah.
I think he shattered it. I think he's established the faith with Bill. I really think he has.
I think the fact that he catches the ball is the difference. He's not an exclusively running back. That's LeGarrette Blount's job.
Yeah, and pretty much every other than Shane Vereen, which was like the most consistent back you could have, but he was strictly catch passing or pass catching. And now Dion Lewis fills the shoes of both LeGarrette Blount and Shane Vereen as a dual kind of role guy.
I mean, Dion Lewis was great last year. In only 9 games, I mean, he didn't rush the ball a ton. He only had like 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. But as far as catching goes, the guy in those 7 games, he caught 36 balls for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he was getting peppered in those 4 games. So, I mean, fuck, if he can stay healthy, granted he hasn't proven that to us yet, he's definitely pretty valuable, especially in PPR leagues. So keep your eye on that boy. The last guy I want to get into is Martellus Bennett. We already kind of hopped on him. He's been great the last few years. He had 53 catches, almost 500 yards, and 3 TDs last year. He missed 5 games last year as well. But it's Tom Brady. We've seen how it's a great offense for 2 tight ends, especially if both are very talented. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think he's going to be great. You can
late
get him super
flyer,
late. Yeah, he's
flyer.
like the 15th overall tight end right now.
And maybe he ends. What do you have any projections for him?
I mean, I wrote down a little bit just because Gronk is there. I think he's good for 40 catches, 500 yards, and another 5 TDs. I mean, it's going to be certain weeks. If Gronk ever goes down, he's huge.
Yeah, pick him up because he'll be used.
Yeah, but no. I mean, I still think he sits behind him a little bit, but there is a higher upside with him, much higher than any other tight end 2 on any other team. So
I agree.
I mean, he's definitely worth a 15th round pick.
Yeah, exactly. I would say so. And guys, that wraps us up for today. Next week we're going to do the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Lions. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, and comment wherever you can. We appreciate the support. And you guys have a good one. Enjoy.
See y'all later.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Frank.